Well, hello there. We live in a time where people will talk about absolutely anything. We talk about everything. We talk about traumas, we talk about our therapies, we talk about childhoods, except this one thing, which is the topic of today's episode of The Terri Cole Show. When people have a less than perfect or optimal relationship with their mother or maternal figure, it is hard to talk about for so very many reasons. So, if this is you, if you have trouble with your relationship with your mother or your mother figure, or you believe that you have a mother wound, this episode of The Terri Cole Show is for you because it is mother wound season. So, I've been talking all about mother wounds on social media and everywhere else leading up to my course, which is starting in a couple of weeks. So, today on The Terri Cole Show, we're talking about why it's so hard to talk honestly about your mother, right? And what happens when we don't tell the truth about what our experience was. So this is something that women come into therapy for often, is having a mother wound. And it's one of the least talked about struggles like that. I feel like women often carry problematic relationship with their mother in silence, right? And a lot of times they feel like, what's wrong with me? Assuming that they're the only one who feels that way. So if that is you, let me tell you, I can promise you are not the only one, and that there are hundreds of thousands, millions of women out here, and certainly many in my community, who feel the same way and have had this experience. So let's talk a little bit about the pushback we get socially, right? So what happens? Well, people will say things like, she did her best, right? You should be grateful. If your mother has passed away, people may say, don't speak ill of the dead. You know what I mean? Like really getting into the guilt, or she sacrificed everything for you. So much of the time, these responses come from other people, right? And sometimes it's something that you're literally saying to yourself about it. Like it's very easy to talk yourself out of owning what happened in your life, because it's almost like we can instantaneously turn this into something else or make it less bad than it was. So why does this taboo still exist? In a lot of ways, mothers occupy this unique cultural position, right? And to criticize her can feel like criticizing the person who gave you life, basically. But it's a combination, though, platter, when you think about it. In a lot of ways, mothers are sanctified. They're also vilified, right? In that the expectations are so high. So either way, it's a hard thing to talk about, right? Because a lot of us were raised to also protect our mother's feelings above sort of anything else. Like we know this, and we also know we need our mothers. So I think that for some, staying silent, it was more about survival than a lot of other things. But here's the problem, of course, that where does the rub exist? The rub, therein lies the rub, is that you can't heal what you're not allowed to name or acknowledge or talk about. So what happens is that if we unhealed or unexplored mother wounds, they start to come out sideways, right? They impact how we relate to other women, oftentimes, how we receive care, how we feel about having our own needs. If you are not sort of coming through the front door with acknowledging that you have a mother wound, it's almost like in therapy, I could be endlessly treating the symptoms. So I had a client who came in. I'll give you a couple of examples. So I had a client who came in and was having all these difficulties in her friendships. But when we got down to it, she told me this whole story of before she was getting married, that she had told her mother that how badly her fiance was treating her, how controlling they were, how she didn't think it was the right thing to get married. And the mother basically was just like, you know what? He's a good provider and he's good looking, and if it doesn't work out, you can get divorced. So we're talking about someone who really threw her own kid under the bus. And there was many, many, many other examples with this client. But when we stopped treating just the symptoms, just how this was coming out in her friendships, and went back to the original injury, is when things started shifting in her female relationships. So I could easily see this connection in connecting the dots between who she was attracting in her life. So these were women who were very entitled, who were possessive of her time, who were jealous of her other friends. Like, there was all this dysfunction that she had been playing out in her female friendships, that when we were able to get to the original injury, there was no need for her to play it out anymore. So it became, we were not talking about her problematic friends. When she finally gave herself permission and gave us permission to talk about her problematic and selfish mother. And that had been something that she was protecting. The little kid in her was so afraid because she really needed her mother, because she had an abusive father. And so as much as she had a mother and a father wound, which is also very common, especially if you are from an abusive background. But there was this shift in what she could see that she was playing out. And now, in real time, we could see her responses and reactions changing. She was able to become the observer of her own responses without judgment, rather than being in it. And this is the difference when we can look at and discover and analyze and unpack the actual original injury. Like, what is this really about? And all of the stuff I talked about at the top, these are all blocks to us talking about it, right? Because societally, people are telling us, if you talk about this, you are bad. So, and also, what is wrong with you that you had this kind of relationship with your mother, or that you didn't get what you needed? There was a famous Jeanette McCurdy, who is an actress. She wrote a book called a memoir, I'm Glad My Mom Died. And it is an explicit, and it really created a cultural conversation about a toxic mother-daughter relationship. And it was interesting, like, she chose a very provocative title, but if you read that book, what she was sharing in that book was all this enmeshment that she had with her mother, and all of this control, emotional abuse, eating disorders, financial abuse. There was so much that she experienced, and how she finally liberated herself after her mother died. She was able to sort of get to that original injury. What ends up happening for us, though, is that if we stay silent about our problematic relationships with a mother, it just keeps playing out. So it seeps into all of these other relationships. And I think that before thinking about or contemplating doing more work on a mother wound, let's give ourselves permission, right? You can love your mother, right? Not everyone would be glad that their mother died, like Jeanette McCurdy, right? So that isn't everyone's situation, and extreme abuse isn't everyone's situation. And here's the thing, it doesn't have to be for you to have a mother wound, right? And naming a painful pattern is not the same necessarily as indicting someone, right? This work and allowing yourself to do this work is about you and about the quality of your life and your relationships. So I don't know, I with all of my work that I do with parental wounding, it's really not about the parents. And of course, there's plenty of talking about them if you're in a course about it, or if we're doing a workshop on it. But we understand that mothers are humans who carried their own unexamined wounds, right, into their relationship. If you ended up having a very problematic relationship with your mother, if she was abusive, even if she was just negligent, and I don't say just, because negligence is for real and leaves its own scars, but they're different scars. So that still matters to you, right? It still impacts you. If your mother never did her work and never really understood herself and never really took responsibility for the ways that she failed you. You are probably still have some kind of an activatable wound. So when you get down to any work that you do around parental wounds, the goal is understanding, right? It's really not about blame. And I think that, listen, the adults who raised us, if we are going to put blame on anyone, it's their side of the street, the ways that they failed us. But that's not the point of doing the work, because that doesn't help you. You know that. You are a grown up now, right? The ways that I failed my own children, and of course I did, that's my side of the street, right? That's not, I don't blame my mother for that. I take responsibility, and I did my best not to. And yet, of course, you still do, because we all miss the mark. But you have to give yourself permission to look at what you experienced, right? Be curious about your own story. When we get radically curious about, why am I the way that I am? Curiosity itself is not betrayal of anyone or anything. Again, it's not about that. It's about you being able to self-reflect, being able to look. And I think that for many women, looking honestly at the mother relationship, this is one of the most liberating things that you can actually do in life. And I think that, when I was able to honestly look at my relationship with my own mother, because I have such a father wound, that I was very convinced that my father was all bad and that my mother was all good. And that's never the twain shall meet. That was the way it was, until I had a therapist who, and I remember being so mad at her pointing out different things, like where she was sort of like, okay, so you've got this narrative that like your father is an ogre and your mother is perfect. And she helped me see that two-dimensional narrative was not helpful to me, right? That I could love my mother and honestly look at the ways that she failed me, because that was what I needed to do in order to heal for myself. So if we look at the, in the popular culture conversation, there are some brave, famous people who have talked about their mothers, writing memoirs, and someone like Brooke Shields, again, talking about not being protected by her mother, being sexualized at such a young age in movies like Pretty Baby. And then she went on to also talk about being assaulted. In her memoir, she talks about this. And there's a connection between having a domineering mother who did not protect her and what ended up happening to her. It's not that that was her fault, of course not. But if you have a parent, a mother in particular, who did not protect you, there is a part of you that believes you are not worth protecting, which is why it is so important that we actually allow ourselves to look at honestly, take an honest inventory of what we experienced in childhood, and not letting society and all of this, you only have one mother and she did the best that she could. Trust me, my clients with mother wounds, if someone says to them, you only have one mother, they go, thank God. Thank God I didn't have to go through that twice. And I feel like you have to give yourself freedom to have the conversation. Other celebrities who've talked publicly about having a mother wound, Mariah Carey talked about not being protected emotionally by her mother. So I think that she had childhood abuse as well. Drew Carey, who has, done a lot of healing work on herself, but she's spoken about being exposed to adult environments. There's famous pictures of her at Studio 54 when she's 7 years old, right? And described her mother as more of a friend. So what does that indicate? Parentification. She was kind of on her own, or maybe she felt responsible for her mother. She has also talked about going through long periods of estrangement with her mother and the lack of appropriate boundaries, and how that impacted her life and went on to impact the way that she interacted in her relationships and what she thought she deserved. And I think that one of the most important aspects of us deciding that it's okay to have an honest conversation about the ways that your mother failed you, because it's the only way that we can actually get to healing. And we don't talk about how, you'll hear from other people that they'll say to you, oh, just forgive and forget. It's time to move on. I want to say to anyone who's ever said that to anyone, please don't. Please, if you do not have a mother wound, you do not understand what it means to have a mother wound, which is why I think that there's a lot of public conversation, a lot of times from people who are not psychotherapists. I won't necessarily name names, but I don't think that it is healthy to tell people to forget about it, to let it go, to get over it, to be the bigger person, to forgive, quote unquote. Again, that word forgiveness being co-opted, especially if you have had emotional neglect or abuse, or physical or sexual neglect or abuse. That is not good advice. Good advice is tending to those wounds so you can be liberated from the prison that unhealed mother wounds create, because it infiltrates every part of our lives. If we don't handle it, if we don't manage it, and if we don't integrate it, because that's what we're talking about, is how can we be honest with ourselves? How can we understand what happened, heal that child within, soothe that kid, right? And not deny what we experienced. And then we integrate that into our lives. And one of the biggest liberating pieces is that when you heal it, when you really do get on that healing journey, you no longer have a need to act it out in your relationships, because usually with a mother wound, that can be the most painful place where it ends up playing out. So if this is resonating with you, if you're like, oh my God, that's me, sign up for my mother wound course, right? This is a perfectly safe container to understand and transform your mother wound. Go to terricole.com/mother wound. I would love to lead you on this life-changing adventure. And hey, if this episode of the Terri Cole Show sparked anything for you, if you know someone who you think has an unhealed mother wound, please share it with them. I hope you guys have the most amazing week. And as always, take care of you.